Ah, the Pacifist run. A classic among challenge runs, wouldn't you agree? I'd be surprised if I was the first person to attempt one for Daggerfall, but I also haven't exactly gone out of my way to see if it's been done before. Let's go over today's goals and get right into the run, shall we? First, we're going to be completing the main story of Daggerfall. That much should be obvious. Second, we're going to be doing it as a pacifist, by which I mean we can't kill our enemies directly using weapons, damaging magic, enchanted equipment, or things like damage and spell reflection. Finally, we're going to do all of this as a vampire. Vampires. What can be said about them that hasn't been said already? They're beautiful, terrifying, powerful, they're edgy and sexy, and everyone's favorite slutty Halloween costume. In Morrowind, being a vampire gets you shunned and ostracized by common people. In Oblivion, you go somewhat incognito, until your vampirism advances to a state that's more noticeable. In Skyrim, we got a whole expansion and faction quests centered around them. These gothic horror monsters feature heavily in the Elder Scrolls as a franchise, and it's no surprise that we find them in Daggerfall. If you're coming here from my last video, where I beat the game as a werewolf, you may be expecting me to follow suit and make a character whose skills match those that a vampire gains bonuses in. And I was tempted to do this at first, except for one problem. The skill bonus is almost exactly the same as the ones that werewolves get, except that vampires don't get the plus 30 to swimming. The attribute bonuses are a little different, but still, doing basically the same run twice in a row seemed boring to me. Hence the pacifist angle this time. Being a pacifist will lead to some unique complications for vampires that I'll get more into as they become relevant. But enough waffling, let's get into our character for today. We're going to be picking a Breton for their innate magic resistance, and then after that we'll build our custom class. These are going to be our skills. Our primary skills are going to be magical. Alteration, mysticism, and restoration are all extremely useful for different reasons. No, I'm not going to be getting around the no harming enemies rule by technically banishing them instead, as funny as that would be. No. Mysticism is here because for anybody trying to avoid combat, its effects are invaluable. It can fortify your language skills, lock doors, and, most importantly, teleport us out of danger. Alteration will give us access to some extra defenses and utility if we find that we need it. And Restoration is here to provide a reliable source of fatigue, as well as giving us the ability to heal our wounds. I'll explain why that is later. You might notice one conspicuous absence from the list. Where is Illusion? Illusion only really has one spell effect. Chameleon, Shadow Form, and Invisibility are all effectively the same thing, except that each has different conditions. Light is not really necessary in vanilla Daggerfall Unity. There are no places in the game where it is actually difficult to see. We'll be using invisibility for sure, but it won't be a skill that we actually care about leveling up. Again, you'll see why in a bit. Continuing on from there, we have stealth, because if we're going to avoid enemies, then I don't see a reason not to bring it. It may also end up training a little more than usual, because we won't be killing our enemies. Climbing, because mobility throughout dungeons is invaluable, and mercantile. I had initially thought that it might be helpful for getting slightly better deals on equipment, since not being able to kill enemies means that we won't be getting nearly as much in the way of loot. But spoiler warning, it didn't come in nearly as handy as I thought it might. Our minor skills include running and a few language skills. If you're new here and don't know how leveling works in Daggerfall, let me fill you in, because it's very different from the later games. Your level is calculated using 6 skills, your 3 primary skills, your 2 highest level major skills, and your highest level minor skill. For our purposes, that means that Mercantile and our other languages are basically just here to fill up space, while the others are skills we actually plan to use. Ironically, this is one of the only runs where language skills might end up being somewhat relevant. They have the potential to render certain enemies passive, making it so that they won't attack us. It's just a shame that they don't train more easily. Next, we'll cover our attributes. Our willpower and agility and luck are all going to be down to 10. These points are going to be distributed evenly across the remaining attributes. The main thing that these stats do for us is occasionally allow us to avoid weapon attacks and resist spells, which we're not going to be super concerned about doing, ironically enough. Alright, cool. You get all that? Great. Now I'm going to fuck with advantages and disadvantages. advantages. First things first, our disadvantages. Damage from sunlight and damage from holy places. We're already planning to become a vampire, but we can't contract the illness until level 2, so I figured we should add this for the meanwhile. I also decided to take forbidden material steel. Steel is useful, but it gets outclassed extremely quickly if we ever care to actually improve our equipment. I also decided to take critical weaknesses to fire and frost. And finally, inability to regen spell points. I took this because I thought it would be vital to our success this run, and I'll explain my thought process later. Ultimately, it was unnecessary though. To offset these disadvantages, I take Magery 3x, meaning that our spell points will be equal to 3 times our intelligence score. We also take immunity to poison. Getting poisoned and having to fret over whether I should quick save is annoying. Finally, spell absorption general. Being unable to regen our spell points is going to occasionally be a problem, but we should be able to overcome that disadvantage with this. It's like a build your own Atronach sign or something. Then I crank our max hit points per level to 30. What this means is that every time we level up, we gain between 15 to 30 hit points, plus our endurance modifier. Since we're going to have 80 endurance after the final stat roll, that means we're gaining between 18 to 33 hit points every level. We're going to be a beefy boy. This should help us survive those spells that we have critical weaknesses to, as well as the sun should we ever need to step into it. With that, I'll move on to our career quiz, and we'll try to keep it mostly helpful. Our final character page looks like this. We're going to get all the stats we care about to 100 anyway, so don't worry too much about how it looks. After that, we receive our mission from the Emperor and wash up on the shores of Daggerfall. Now, Nellic didn't much appreciate being voluntold to go to Daggerfall and sort out this Lysandis deal. Nellic was quite happy living in the Imperial City and having a cushy do-nothing job as a bureaucrat that was paid way more than it was actually worth. Of course, he can't just say no because that's the Emperor, but he's still not going to be happy about it. Now I'm going to demonstrate something that's important to understand here. As you can see, it is currently 1:40 in the afternoon here in beautiful Privateer's Hold. If I leave the dungeon, you can see that being outside doesn't immediately vaporize me in the same way it might in Oblivion. Damage from the sun and holy places ticks once every 4 in-game rounds, or about every 20 seconds. And will deal 12 damage each time. There's no variance in that number either. It's exactly 12 damage every single time. You'll also notice that fast travel is currently impossible for us. As long as we're taking damage from the sun, we won't be able to fast travel between 6 AM and 6 PM. The solution? Simply find a place to sleep until nighttime. We're going to sleep for 5 hours in the starting room in Privateer's Hold and then exit the dungeon. As it's now 6 PM, we can fast travel away from Privateer's Hold. We're going to avoid going to Daggerfall City for now. Old restless Lysandis will sick ghosts on us if we're outdoors in his city at night, and right now we're not quite equipped to deal with that. Our current goal is to get to level 2. Vampirism cannot be contracted at level 1, same as lycanthropy, so we're going to go to Alcair City. If you're somewhat new to Daggerfall as a game and don't know this yet, every region has a capital of the same name. Daggerfall's capital is Daggerfall, Wayrest's capital is Wayrest, the Hrothgarian Mountains' capital is Hrothgaria, and so on and so forth. We're going to Alcair to run some quick errands before we begin our adventure proper. First of all, we're going to take out a loan. We might pay this back if we feel like it. This is when we get our first letter from Briscienna. We're actually just going to blow her off. Nellic is not happy about his assignment. The sun is damaging his fragile skin. Then we're going to join the Mages Guild so we can get access to the Spellmaker and a few custom spells. First is going to be our training spell. I'm sure that most of you are aware that creating low-level spells that you can spam for experience in a particular school is common practice for Elder Scrolls. What's less common, I believe, is that if we apply multiple different schools to a spell, we can train all 3 at the same time. This means we won't have to pay trainers, and we can level the skills we care about the most. We're doing this for a reason, too. Training will become much more annoying than it is worth for us during this run. We're also going to get a recall spell. This will primarily make it so that backtracking out of dungeons is much less annoying, because we're going to be skipping that. After that, we're going to be making a custom regeneration spell. This spell heals us for 3 hit points every round for many, many rounds. It's our sunscreen spell. It won't stop us from taking damage, but it will heal us for health equal to the amount of damage that we take from the sun. For now, that clears up our errands. I'm just going to climb the side of this building a couple of times, and as we fast travel, we'll get to level 2. Now we need to get our infection. We're going to Singbury on the Isle of Balfiera, and we're going to immediately just start walking east. Since we've got quite a bit of walking to do, let's discuss vampirism a little bit. If you watched the last video, you may recall that I brought up enemy spawn locations so that we could find a random werewolf in a dungeon so that we could acquire our infection. This, unfortunately, doesn't work as well for vampires. Vampires don't become common as random enemies until about level 9, and for good reason. Now, it's not actually impossible to run into one before then, but trying to get a random one at level 2 is going to be a bit of a pain. That means we need to either find a quest that spawns a vampire, or a story location where vampires are guaranteed to spawn. I know that the Isle of Balfiera's Direni Tower has 2 vampires right near the beginning, but since we don't have the location on our map yet, getting to it is going to be a bit of a chore. And so that is our destination for the walk. If you're somewhat familiar with Elder Scrolls Vampirism, you know that there exist different strains: Porphyric Hemophilia, Sanguinaire Vampiris, Noxophilic Sanguivoria. If you're a little more savvy, you may know that you can join different families in Morrowind. The Onde, Burn, and Quara clans, each with slightly different benefits. In Daggerfall, there are 9 different families to join. Which family you join is determined by where you were when you died of the disease. Now, you may be wondering why I didn't simply join a knightly order and take the quest to save a princess from a vampire, and the reason is simple. The family that I want to join does not exist in any region associated with knightly orders. We're planning to join the Lyrezi, who exist in Alcaire, Menevia, Coigria, the Rothgarian Mountains, the Isle of Balfiera, and the Orsinium area, none of which have any joinable knightly orders. In addition to this, random quests that happen to feature vampires require a level of regional reputation that would require us to do several quests in the area before we could even get them. This normally wouldn't be an issue, but since most quests require us to kill enemies in some fashion, we're going to be trying to avoid them if at all possible. So what does vampirism even do for us? We're already dealing with one of the major downsides in our damage from sunlight disadvantage, but what else happens? Well, for one, we get plus 20 to almost all our attributes. Where werewolves get plus 40 to speed, strength, endurance, and agility, vampires will get 20s across the board, except for intelligence. They also get plus 30 to climbing, critical strike, hand-to-hand, jumping, running, and stealth. If this sounds familiar, it's because it's identical to the bonuses that werewolves get, except that werewolves also get the plus 30 to swimming. Vampires also share an immunity to disease with lycanthropes. Now, if that was it, it would almost be strictly worse than lycanthropy. But let's get into the things unique to vampires. Vampires will gain immunity to paralysis. If you played a High Elf, this doesn't do much for you, but for anyone else, it's a massive boon. Vampires also gain the spells Levitation, Calm Humanoid, and Charm Mortal. Levitation we've gone over in previous videos. It does as it says on the tin. Calm Humanoid and Charm Mortal are different though. These are thaumaturgical effects that have a similar effect to a successful language check. Now, this is where it gets a little bit confusing. Charm Mortal works on actual human foes. Barbarians, mages, nightblades, etc. Charm Humanoid does not. Humanoid, in this case, refers to non-human enemies that somewhat resemble humans. I didn't test each of these myself, but according to the UESP, centaurs, gargoyles, giants, harpies, imps, nymphs, orcs, spriggans, wereboars, and werewolves all fall under humanoid. Got all that? Fantastic. Let's elaborate a bit on the 9 families. Now, we're not going to be doing the quests associated with the families today, but the long and short of it is that those quests are identical to one another. As for mechanical differences, here they are. Anthotis vampires will get the plus 20 to their intelligence in addition to all of the other stats. Garlythi will gain a shield spell. Harvinu will gain the spells Ice Storm and Wildfire. Hulari will gain a paralysis spell. Selinu will gain a resist spell of the 3 main elements. Thrafe will gain a heal spell. Vroseth will gain a nimbleness spell. Monteleon is kind of hilarious because they will gain a free action spell. You know, the spell that cures paralysis. The paralysis that vampires by default are immune to. Yeah, it's a funny prank. Finally, the family that we're trying to join, the Lyrezi, will get an invisibility and a silence spell. Now, you may be wondering what the significance of getting any family's spells are, and the reason is this. Spells gained from vampirism can be cast at a quarter of their normal cost. This makes them extremely magicka efficient, something that we're going to find invaluable. So that covers all of the upsides. What about the downsides? Well, the first downside is the damage in sunlight and holy places that we already have. The next downside is that we need to feed every single night, or we can't rest to pass time, which means that we can't regain health, stamina, or magicka by sleeping. Feeding normally means killing basically anything that isn't an undead, so it's rare that this ends up being a problem outside of town. Unlike the werewolf, we don't actually need to hunt innocent civilians to slake this hunger. This is going to be the main reason that we bring Restoration as a primary skill, and is why we took the inability to restore spell points disadvantage. Members of the Mages Guild will restore our magicka if we aren't able to do so ourselves. That should hopefully let us restore our resources somewhat reliably, but passing time is still going to be a pain. After I finally finished my walk to Direni Tower, I spent 2.5 fucking hours trying to contract this godforsaken illness. When doing this for werewolves, it took maybe 45 minutes. I actually had to restart to arrive here with more health than the first time because I kept getting killed. This is because vampires as enemies are much stronger than werewolves. Vampires in Daggerfall are level 19 enemies, and deal between 20 and 50 damage per attack. Cranking my maximum hit points per level to 30 was no mistake. Without it, the odds that we actually survive one of their attacks at level 2 are quite minuscule. In the first trek out to Direni Tower, we would walk in with 55 hit points and would still occasionally get one-shot by the vampires. I believe this has to do with their bonus to hit humanoids advantage, which doesn't actually increase their chance to hit at all, and instead increases the damage dealt by an amount equal to their level. If that is the case, then their damage against players is more accurately 39 to 69, rather than the 20 to 50 displayed on the UESP. This seemed to hold true because after our second trek to the tower, we actually arrived with full HP, and were still only barely escaping getting one shot.
Your sleep is troubled by nightmares of a beautiful woman who will be murdered in a dark place.
But now that we finally have our disease 5 pages into the script, the game can begin. Now, getting vampirism is only the first part. Much like lycanthropy, we're still in the stage where it can be cured using cure disease or praying at a temple. It has a gestation period of 3 days where we're able to cure it. During that time frame, I headed back to Alcaire to pick up another custom spell. This one's a health restore that should pretty much always restore us to full HP unless we get some really lucky health rolls in the coming 8 levels. I forgot to do this beforehand, so we'll be coming back to make one more spell later. After that, we settle in for the night and we die in our sleep. Ah, shucks, guys. Looks like that's it. No, obviously not. At least obvious to us. I imagine this would have surprised a few people if they didn't know what was going on. But definitely obvious to us. Just look how much time is left. But what's this? We wake up in a dungeon and find that our transformation is complete. Death isn't the end for us, and now the challenge can begin in earnest. Let's take a look at what's changed, shall we? Jesus, we're ugly. That's not very sexy at all. We've got the aforementioned stat buff and the new spells, all of which only cost 5 magicka, which is just great to see. 5 magicka is the minimum amount that we can spend to cast any spell. You may also notice that we now have no affiliations. Any guilds we joined as a human are lost when we become vampires. This causes issues if you joined things like the Thieves Guild or Dark Brotherhood, but for the Mages Guild we can just rejoin them. Our first order of business is going to be getting to Daggerfall and getting to level 3. We're going to be doing the main story quests at the earliest point that we can, with one minor exception in Orcish Emancipation, which we will be delaying to level 6 so that we can do Elisana's robe. Daggerfall City is going to be uniquely annoying for us to traverse until we resolve the Lysandis issue. During the day, we'll take damage from the sunlight, and at night, we'll be accosted by King Lysandis. I'm hoping to avoid wasting too much time on making runs to shops and the like during the day. This is going to end up demonstrating how annoying it is to not be able to wait or rest. I don't even really want to get my hit points or fatigue back, I just want to wait for the bank to open, which unfortunately doesn't happen until 8 AM. Whenever we fast travel to a city, we're going to be arriving around 6 PM most of the time. This means that if we ever need to access a bank during this playthrough, we're going to need to wait 14 in-game hours. Since we can't use the wait function, that's an equivalent to a full real-life hour and 10 minutes. And then, once we're done with our business at the bank, it's going to be another 10 in-game hours or 50 real-life minutes before we can fast travel away. The Mages Guild walls are going to become extremely familiar to us, as the guild is going to be a sort of home base for us since we can replenish our resources here. Unfortunately, there's not much to be done for us except wait. As you might be able to tell, if we ever have to go to a bank or anywhere that's open in the early morning but not after 6 PM, we're going to be doing a lot of waiting around. We can't open the wait menu in the first place, and if it's after 6 AM, we can't even go outside to fast travel to do anything else. Now that we have the 2 restoration spells I was most concerned about, we can focus on training, fast traveling to get the levels, and then hitting up the Mages Guild again so that we can regain our magicka to continue training. Once we hit level 3, we'll talk to Obki and get concern for Nulfaga. We talk to Nulfaga, return to Obki, and then get our quest to go to Necromogan. This results in the fastest visit to the castle that I've ever had. We walked in, climbed one wall, and left. To be honest, I had been expecting this to be our first real hurdle in the main quest, since it's the first one where we have to look around for a while we avoid the enemies. Oh well, I'm not going to complain about it. With that, we return to Obki and head to Wayrest. We're going to deal with Morgaya and finally deliver her letter to Manamarco. Despite Skurg Barrow being a bit of a dungeon, since we know where we're going, it's not really a challenge to make it through without attacking anything. This one's also pretty simple for a pacifist like ourselves. Returning to Morgaya clears up our level 3 quests and gets us past the very beginnings of the game. We're going to stay in Wayrest for a bit and get to level 4 so that we can deal with Prince Helseth as well. A trend you'll notice with most of Daggerfall's quests is that we don't actually need to kill our enemies to complete the quests. This quest, for example, Blackmail, is a simple letter delivery. We don't even have to go to a dungeon to complete it. There'll be a few notable exceptions. One is coming up shortly, but there'll be more, particularly as we get closer to the end of the game. That's not to say that every quest is going to be easy, however. We're going to train to level 5 to receive a letter from Prince Loten, and once we do, we'll travel to Sentinel. Loten is going to start a quest that will require us to wait for a bit before we're contacted by an agent of the Underking and told where to find his brother's death certificate. While we wait, we're going to... Oh, god damn it. Oh, god damn it. It's 6 AM, you know what that means. At least one full real-life hour of waiting while we wait for the clock to hit 6 PM. I'm so looking forward to getting some real dungeoning going on, even if I can't kill anything. This is what I get for not checking the clock as I come into town. While I was waiting, I tested something I wasn't sure about. I was kind of under the impression that if you were a vampire who hadn't fed and you ran out of fatigue, you would simply die. If you aren't able to rest normally, I figured that you would collapse from exhaustion and simply not awaken. Kinda like if you pass out around monsters. That wasn't actually the case, and you awaken an hour later like normal. This is also when I noticed that fast traveling would restore our health and fatigue even though we hadn't fed. So much for the inability to restore spell points being vital to our success. Good to know that, so I don't have to panic if I run out of fatigue in the cities. I'm going to set an anchor near Loten, and I'm going to double check to make sure it's 6 PM before I return to him. Alright, with that done, we can now finally fast travel so that we can actually pass some goddamn time. In any case, we finally wait for nightfall and then get the letter to meet our contact. We're told to go to the Fortress of Fojum, which, if we're lucky, will be another extremely short excursion. We're not lucky. It wasn't that long, but it was quite a bit longer than our first visit in the werewolf video where we spent almost no time here at all. It takes a little searching, but we do eventually find the death certificate, and once we do, we teleport back to our anchor in front of Loten. We turn over the item and complete the quest. With that, we return to Daggerfall and speak to the cook in the castle. She will offer us information in exchange for killing a werewolf in Bettany. This is the first quest we've been given that supposedly cannot be completed without the death of our target, so this is where we're going to have to get a bit creative. Most of you have probably surmised that we're going to be trying to cause some infighting between our enemies. We've witnessed it in passing a few times during the small amount of dungeoning we have done, and it's probably the easiest way we're going to have to dispatch enemies without killing them ourselves. The real question is how difficult it'll be to do it intentionally. Here's a surprise though. The beast doesn't actually require us to kill a werewolf in order to complete the quest. If you've played it for yourself, you may have found the diary entries of the werewolf in question. If you found the one where he remarks about how he broke up with Syndas's friend, followed by a name and a location, you can actually go find her. If you do, she will offer to help you complete the quest in a non-lethal way. It does technically require us to hit the wolf a few times, but we don't actually kill it, so I think it still counts. Let me know if this fails a pacifist challenge, since we do technically need to draw blood in order to save him. For the record, I tried for a long time to get enemies to infight with the werewolf, but it didn't seem to be working. I tried with both humans and zombies, who seemed to be the only enemies that would spawn in the area. Honestly, leading a parade of humans around and having them simply refuse to attack a werewolf was kind of amusing. Enemies don't seem to be able to hit each other accidentally either. I'm hoping that this doesn't become a regular feature of this run, because there's at least one quest that I'm almost certain we can't avoid an enemy death. And if we can't do it with infighting, it's gonna take a little ingenuity to figure out. I'm actually super stoked about this ending, because I don't believe I'd ever even considered that this might be a possibility for this quest. And there's a reason for that. Looking at the UESP, I believe that this quest path is broken in the original Daggerfall EXE, but it seems to be working presumably as it was originally intended in the Unity version. My point is that I don't have anything installed except Daggerfall Unity, so this isn't coming from some external quest pack or something. Moving on from this, we have the Emperor's Courier. This is essentially a series of letter deliveries that requires us to be in a particular town on a particular day. Most quests can be completed long before their supposed due dates, but this one has a section that requires us to meet up with a courier who will only be in town for a single day. I was worried that this would prove bothersome, what with our particular time constraints, but everything seemed to work out rather simply. We met up with our courier, received proof of his loyalty, and returned to Minisera without a hitch. Moving on, we're going to level 6 and starting Elisana's robe. You know it, you love it, it's the incest noble assassination quest that takes 2 minutes to do. If you're unfamiliar with why we're doing this before Orcish Emancipation, even though that is technically a level 5 quest, it's because if we get the Emperor's letter before helping Elisana, we don't actually get to do that quest at all, and are locked out of completing it. Again, everything's going smoothly until I turn in the quest, and as I go to walk out the door, I find that it is 6:01 in the AM. Fuck. I guess we're stuck waiting for another hour. So far, this has turned out to be the most annoying part of the run, because it just makes everything take so much longer than it needs to. Well, now that that wait's over with, we can ding 7 and start the next couple of quests, and this is when I realize we might have a problem. I'm going to assume that you're not familiar with Mannimarco. Manny and I are real tight. Dude's like the best necromancer ever. Only problem is that if he's inviting me over, he sends these rotting undead he calls zombies after me. Now, normally this isn't a problem, but currently it absolutely is one. Normally, killing this zombie allows us to read a letter from Manny, inviting us over so that he can lay another quest on us. Not too hard, all things considered, except that we can't kill the zombie this time. That's going to cause us some problems. I tried just going to the man himself, but he really wants me to read the letter even though I already know the contents of it. So we're in for a bit of a rough time, I think. For now, I'm going to put that on the back burner. While I think of ways to deal with the problem, we're going to go to Sentinel and speak with Queen Akarithi. She wants us to go to Wayrest and steal the painting from their vault. I set an anchor in the castle and I travel to Wayrest. The Lyrezi family's gift for invisibility was extremely helpful in this endeavor. Costing only 5 magicka to be invisible for about a minute and a half means that if we enter the dungeon with full magicka, we can avoid being messed with for about a real-life hour, and still have enough magicka to recall away from the dungeon. Provided, of course, that the primary denizens of said dungeon are not undead or Daedra. This is usually the hardest dungeon in the game for me, but I may have finally figured it out. It only took me around 15 minutes to navigate over to the painting this time and recall back to Sentinel. Very satisfying to conquer these dungeons quickly without needing to resort to bloodshed. With that, we return to Castle Daggerfall and speak to Minisera again. We're going to grab the letter from the Orcs' stronghold in Orsinium. The Orcs should be fairly easy to avoid with our invisibility. I, actually forgot to do this before grabbing the painting, but it doesn't make a huge difference. We quickly speak to Minisera, set an anchor, grab the letter, and then return to our anchor without much fuss. This only took around 3 or 4 minutes. But now we return to our previous problem. We need to kill a zombie to get the letter on its body so that we can speak to Mannimarco about a story quest. This isn't optional either. It must be done, or we will not be able to progress the main quest at all. My first attempt was to try and get Lysandis' wraith to kill the zombie by being in his city at night. This didn't work. Even when I turned invisible, the wraith could still see me. Even though the zombie couldn't, it didn't suddenly turn on the wraith either. Not entirely unexpected. But what about different enemy types? That is a fantastic question. The problem is getting into a situation where non-undead enemies and the zombie would both spawn. I managed to get a knight and a sorcerer to spawn by hanging out at night in a random town in Sentinel. Neither of these, however, would attack the zombie. The sorcerer got me thinking, though. What about another spellcaster? Sorcerers are the exception among NPC mages, in that they won't actually cast spells at the player. At level 7, like we are, though, other mages will have access to spells like Firestorm and Lightning, which can deal damage in an area. This is actually why liches will sometimes kill themselves accidentally in Daggerfall's tight corridors. Alright, so I've got my plan. How do I spawn enemy spellcasters? Anything will do. Mages, Daedra, liches. I just need something that can cast spells that will damage an area. The answer is to accept a quest. Not just any quest, however. Certain quests will spawn enemies to harass and harangue you during your time outside. This is the only way certain enemies will spawn outside of dungeons. As it so happens, the quests gold smuggling and contraband trade are randomly given to us via nobles. So I set to getting this quest. Every time you leave and re-enter a castle, nobles quests will reset. Once we get a desirable introductory dialogue, we can accept the quest and travel. We only had to reset Castle Daggerfall twice before we got it. We traveled to the town described by the quest and got the zombie to spawn. This is good. We don't have to wait all that long before we get a spell sword on us as well. This is a good time to mention our regeneration spells and just how useful they are. If you didn't watch my video about how powerful magic is, you might not know this, but basically, if you want to restore your HP, the heal health effect is practically worthless. You will get more health from a regeneration effect than you ever will from heal health. In our case, the effect heals all of our HP every 4 seconds, and if we cast the more powerful version, it will last for around 8 in-game hours at our current level. This allows us to stand there and take some serious punishment while we wait for enemies to keep spawning. This is because enemies only have so many spell points, and since resisting spells completely nullifies their effects, yes, damage included, it can sometimes take a bit before enemies die to it. Eventually, though, the zombie dies and we get our little message. This was a huge success. I hadn't even considered this little dude's existence, let alone that he might be a roadblock. With the zombie messenger's death, we're able to travel to Skurg Barrow and speak with Manny. We get our quest to go to Sentinel and kill a lich. This one I'm somewhat more prepared for. Liches, as I mentioned before, can sometimes end up killing themselves with their powerful spellcasting. A lich's fireball can do between 21 and 141 damage, and they only have between 30 and 170 hit points. They also have 300 spell points. We go to Sentinel, and I find my way through the lever puzzle again. We're getting better and better at this. I only needed to backtrack one time in order to do it. When we come face to face with the lich, we end up with a bit of a problem. He only cast one spell that might damage him. In an effort to avoid us just having to reload and play the numbers until this guy goes blue whale game on us, I started kiting him around the dungeon. I was really hoping that he would start infighting with some of the other inhabitants, but I'm starting to think that quest-related monsters won't infight. Pushing on, however, we find a few Nightblades who cast their area damaging spells, and eventually the Lich goes down. Another success down without raising a fist or anything. Recall out of the dungeon and return to Scourge Barrow because I forgot to set an anchor there last time. We turn in our quest, and we're on to level 8. We're off to do the Ancient Watcher. We spend a little time traveling around Sentinel before we finally get our letter from an agent of the Underking. We meet with the agent, set an anchor, and then it's off to Castle Lugwich for us. This goes much the same way as with most of the other quests, in that it's basically a walk to the item and then recall to our quest giver. Not much excitement going on here. With that done, we can continue to do Madora's Freedom. We're finally back where it all began. All that time ago, we came here to get infected with vampirism. It feels like a lifetime ago, doesn't it? This time we have some business to attend to, so no messing around for us. We're going straight to Madora, and we know exactly how to get there. Dureni Tower is arguably the hardest dungeon in the whole game. Lysandis' tomb is harder to navigate on repeat playthroughs, sure, but it's unlikely you're going to go there super early. Dureni Tower, on the other hand, is put on your map around level 5, even though it's not actually important to visit until level 8. In a normal blind playthrough, that's several hours away at best, but can be multiple tens of hours if you're struggling with the game. But you get lore about it and learn it's important very early on. This means that there's a not unlikely chance that you go there either before you're a high enough level to accept Madora's quest, or before you've completed the other prerequisite quests. Definite morale crusher if you don't have the direct path to Madora memorized. Speaking of, Madora asks us to get her a great unicorn horn so that we can break the curse that keeps her trapped in the tower. We set an anchor in this room so that we can teleport back to it once we found the horn. The horn can be found in Shedungent, where we met Nulfaga, and is behind a hidden door that is itself in a hidden passageway that is activated by a torch. I swear I always think I have this path memorized, and then it turns out I don't. After picking up the horn, we teleport back to the room in Dureni Tower, hit the switches again, and then return to Madora. This clears the way for us to begin our level 10 quests. If you're wondering about the Book of Baron Zaya because it's a level 9 quest, I swear I'll do it one of these days, but I think that the route I take normally doesn't give me enough reputation with her to start it naturally. So I'm going to have to think of a way to work that in somewhere for future runs. But for now, we're going straight to level 10, and it's time to start the final stretch. Once we hit level 10, I make a save and travel around a bit so that we can get a message from Madora saying that we should speak to Gortwog. This is the last significant hurdle to our pacifist run. Gortwog will give us the name of a dungeon on the Isle of Balfiera, and the dust will be on a mummy somewhere inside that dungeon. The mummy, much like the werewolf, zombie, and lich before, must die. This time so that we can loot it. Okay, but that's not too hard. I mean, we'll just lure it into some more spellcasters, right? Well, that's easier said than done. Let me show you. First, I had to find out where the mummy was, and it wasn't too long until I found this room with some zombies and a cage with a mummy in it. Okay, that's cool, but none of the enemies could infight with the mummy. I don't think that enemies are able to infight with quest-related monsters at this point. I'm pretty sure they just avoid them. This is fine, I figure. I'll get a spellcaster from somewhere and have them cast at me while I'm standing next to the cage. This might have worked if there were any spellcasters in this dungeon. The enemy variety here was somewhat lacking. We had zombies, skeletons, and mummies throughout most of the dungeon, and ice atronachs, dreg, and slaughterfish in the water. None of these enemies have access to spells. This is when I decide to reload the quest completely. We get the message from Madora again, speak with Gortwog again, and this time we're hoping it'll give us a different dungeon with hopefully different enemy types. No such luck. We do get a new mummy spawn, however. I spend around 10 minutes kiting it around before it finally starts infighting with the local ice atronachs, and lo and behold, it dies. I'm elated until I loot its body and realize that it was just a normal mummy, not the quest-related one. Damn it. I find what is probably the quest mummy in the same cage as before and decide to try reloading the quest again. I find the mummy on top of the pillar, and I know from experience that this is very likely the quest mummy spawning in a different place. This is good news, but how do I get this one to die? This is when I levitate up and out of reach to try and change my perspective a bit, and a light bulb goes off. Enemies really like trying to back up from you, but they won't do it if they're against a cliffside. Apparently, however, they will do it if you're levitating above them. Doing this, I got the mummy to fall down to the ground floor. It didn't die, but it was eager to follow me back to another place where I could drop it again and it would finally meet its maker. No, officer, I'm totally innocent. I didn't kill this undead creature. It jumped on its own, I swear. If push came to shove, we probably could have pulled off that trick that let us summon some spellcasters again if we really needed to, but I think this was a more fun way of getting the dust. With it in hand, we can return once more to Madora and hand her the dust. She needs a month to work on it, so we set yet another anchor and leave the dungeon and fast travel a couple of times. Once we return, she tells us to sprinkle the dust on old King Lysandis' body so that we can have a chat with the dude. We make our way through the tomb to Lysandis' body and speak with the man himself. Lysandis tells us that he wants vengeance against this Lord Woodborn guy, puts a dungeon on our map, and it seems pretty obvious that he wants us to kill him. Now, if you're like me, you've probably just gone to Woodborn Hall, found the guy guarded by a giant, and slain him like the treacherous dog he is. Did you know, however, that there is a way we can do this without killing him? You see, in the dungeon is his diary that has evidence that will turn people's attentions to him. If we find this diary and deliver it to certain individuals, it will have different effects. We are going to deliver it to Baron Zaya because she will take action against Lord Woodborn, satisfying Lysandis' need for revenge and completing the quest. Basically, giving the diary to Lysandis' allies will complete the quest, and giving it to his enemies or those neutral to him won't. This is way oversimplified, but I promise it makes sense if you know the story. You do know the story of a 29-year-old RPG that you're watching a YouTube video about, don't you? All we have left to do now is wait for a letter from Brissienna, and oh, that's right, we blew her off at the beginning of the game. Brissienna is an agent of the Emperor Uriel Septim VII. My bad about that whole ignoring your messages thing like a year ago or however long it was in-game. I was a tad annoyed about being told to solve this complex political issue by myself. You'll forgive me, won't you? She says she will, but we have to get the totem of Tiber Septim. Not the answer I was hoping for. We make our way to Daggerfall Castle, and even though someone just went invisible in the throne room in full view of the guards, nobody seems to think that's a red flag. Guys, your last king was just assassinated. You'd think the security would be a little tighter. Getting this quest finished isn't too hard. We walk into the back area of the castle, find the room that holds the vault containing the totem, pull this chain for water breathing, fob this wheel to pull the vault down, touch this chain so that we can teleport out from under the vault, jump on top of the vault to pull this lever, and finally open the section that has the totem itself. We pick it up and it tells us that we are unworthy to bear it and that we must deliver it to someone of Tiber Septim's bloodline. I'm not sure how far the relation is, but here you go, Gortwog. I've done my best to avoid hurting anyone this whole time, and I'm sure that putting the orcs on an even playing field with the other powers will have no negative consequences and no death whatsoever. With the totem safely in the hands of War Chief Gortwog, a vision from Nulfaga calls us to Shedungent, like the Greybeard summoning the Dragonborn. We've only got the final dungeon left to go. The Mantellan Crux is by far my favorite dungeon in the game, though I suppose that's not particularly difficult when the rest of them blend together into one huge tangle of tunnels and stone. We go to Shedungent, speak with Nulfaga, and it's off to the final dungeon. Now, it should be no surprise to anyone that we don't actually need to kill any of the enemies in here. Each room of the Mantellan Crux is an elaborate puzzle of levers and doors opening the way to each area. We completely bypass every enemy. As we move through, we actually get hit with a sleep spell and eventually pass out and die. This is the first actual death we've had since trying to contract vampirism at the very beginning of the run, but I suppose that's not surprising when we've got 260 hit points, well over a reasonable amount to have. I was a little worried that this would end up being a problem since we'd quick saved after getting hit, but it didn't affect us all that much. We make our way through to the fire room that I can never remember how to clear, and our spell absorption gives us a full refill on our magicka. Eventually, we open the doors and can enter the skull. In this room, we activate the skull that looks different and open the door that eventually leads us to Shaggorath. We tell him his second favorite weapon is a crossbow, and then witness the biggest set piece in the game. With that, we walk through the final rooms and find our way to the Mantella and complete our run. Reflecting on this run a little bit, I definitely think that it was an interesting challenge. Overall, the pacifism by itself wasn't as hard as I actually anticipated. Having to actually attack the werewolf and damage it so that we could technically resolve the quest peacefully is probably the only part that I personally have some kind of issue with. It may have been possible to use the trick we used to kill the zombie messenger to damage the werewolf without ourselves having to attack it. Again though, that questline doesn't even work in the original version of Daggerfall. If that, or the fact that we had to punch the guy ourselves, means I failed the quest, then I can kinda understand where you're coming from. With that though, we've come to the end of the video. Thank you all for watching, and I hope that if you've been here the whole time, that you've enjoyed it. Now, let's sit back and watch what Gortwog does with Numidium.
Under the command of Gortwog, Numidium destroys the other powers of Neolian Bay, Daggerfall, Sentinel, and Wayrest. The new Orcish homeland is carved out in Osinium, and the Empire will never be able to dispute Gortwog's claim to Orcish equality.
Well, that's not very pacifist at all. Thank you everybody for watching. Thank you for 5,000 subscribers. The continued support makes it possible for me to keep putting these videos out. I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your days, mornings, evenings, nights, whatever it might be, wherever you are in the world, whenever it is that you watch this. Have a good one.